Mayor Buttigieg, Gene Robinson. I'm going to follow up on Willie's question, actually, and ask you a bit more about my home state of South Carolina, which it's easy to imagine you doing well or winning in Iowa, doing well or winning in New Hampshire, and then coming to South Carolina, where you're really in the single digits, according to the polls, and right now don't look to do very well. What's your point of entry there? What or who is your point of entry there? Do you have endorsements there that that you think will help you? Is there a place in the state where you think you're particularly strong?
Yeah, certainly continuing to do the work on the ground and building out our ground organization there, too. But I'll tell you something else. Black voters that I speak to have raised again and again the fundamental pragmatic question of how are you going to win? So many people I talk to, more than anything else, just urgently want to make sure that we can defeat Donald Trump. Now, there's also a lot of skepticism, especially in the black community, about a new face. And that's one of the reasons why it will be important to succeed in a place like Iowa, to demonstrate to voters in South Carolina who maybe think that the Frederick Douglass plan is a great vision for the future, are certainly open to what they see from our campaign, but really need to see that show of strength. So that's going to be a big part of it, as well as the work we're doing on the ground to continue building up the support that we have in communities and introducing ourselves in places that haven't seen us yet.
Mayor Pete, you mentioned the singular achievement of the Trump administration, the huge tax cut for corporations. And you also referenced the fact that you try to speak to more issues that affect people's everyday lives. And I understand the obligation you must feel and the others must feel to answer specific questions that are asked during the course of the debate. But why is it that you and the rest of the people on the panel last night, on the debate panel last night, the candidates, don't address, just reel off the issues where Donald Trump has altered America already? The rollback in food stamps, the rollback in environmental regulations, the fact that the stock market is soaring each and every day and weekly paychecks haven't moved per capita really in about 2 decades. Why focus on specific study hall questions that you get from debate moderators and not just go right after Trump?
Well, I never miss an opportunity to go after Donald Trump, but I also think this election isn't just about him. If we're going to turn the page, if we're going to move into a new and better American moment, if we're going to not only undo the damage that he's done, but speak to the conditions that brought him here, then we've got to talk about a bigger vision for America. Remember, a guy like Donald Trump should never have been able to come within cheating distance of winning the presidency in the first place. He is a symptom as well as a cause of so many of the problems we're facing in this country. And whether it's on the debate stage or in our campaign events, this is our opportunity to lay out a vision for the future of the republic and for the future of our everyday lives and explain how they go together. Look, if we were to try to spend the evening listing off the ways in which this president has been harmful to our country, 2 hours wouldn't be enough to contain it. But we're going to continue hitting hard on all of the areas where he's let people down, especially, by the way, the people he's sought to speak to, from workers in the industrial Midwest to farmers who he has betrayed at every turn. But it's not just about him. And one of the things I've found speaking to voters in every part of the country is they appreciate that sense that the less we're talking about him, the more we're talking about you.
Former Mayor Pete Buttigieg, thank you very much for coming on the show this morning. It's always great to have you, and we look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
And coming up next hour, the candidate who went after Donald Trump more than any other on last night's debate stage, Senator Amy Klobuchar, will be our guest. We're back in just a moment.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.